The vacuum of space held no sound, but tension crackled through the bridge of the TSV Resolute like an electrical storm. Captain Maya Rodriguez sat in the command chair, her posture a study in controlled stillness. Dark hair pulled back into a tight regulation braid, eyes reflecting the holographic displays that surrounded her. She looked more like a surgeon preparing for a delicate operation than a starship captain. To her left, Lieutenant Chen monitored the incoming sensor data. His fingers danced across the quantum interface, pulling up layers of information about the approaching Zorn patrol vessel. The alien ship was a nightmare of biomechanical engineering, a living weapon that had terrorized merchant routes for decades. Its hull rippled with organic circuitry, tentacle-like sensor arrays extending and retracting like the breathing of some primordial sea creature. "Incoming transmission," Chen announced, his voice carefully modulated. "They're demanding we power down and prepare for inspection." The bridge crew didn't move. They didn't even exchange glances. Each member of the Resolute's team was handpicked, trained beyond the limits of conventional military preparation. This was no ordinary ship. This was the forward element of the Backoff Division, a unit so classified that its very existence was a whispered rumor in the highest levels of human government. Araya, the ship's artificial intelligence, projected a tactical overlay across the main view screen. Her voice was neither male nor female, neither warm nor cold, a pure conduit of processed information. Analyzing Zorn vessel capabilities. Preliminary threat assessment. 73% probability of aggressive action within the next 90 seconds. Captain Rodriguez's lips curled into the ghost of a smile. The Zorn didn't know it yet, but they were about to receive an education. The ship's history was etched into every molecular reinforced bulkhead. The Resolute had been assembled in the hidden shipyards of Titan, constructed from materials that existed in the theoretical margins of human technological understanding. Its quantum shield generators could absorb and redirect energy in ways that would make most species scientists weep with confusion. Lieutenant Alina Kovacs, the mission's strategic integration specialist, leaned forward. Her augmented neural interface flickered with streams of data only she could fully comprehend. "They're following the standard Zorn intimidation protocol," she murmured. "Increasing engine resonance, charging peripheral weapon systems. Textbook threat display." "Textbook," Rodriguez repeated, the word carrying the weight of infinite possibility. The Zorn had built their reputation on fear. Their patrol vessels were less about exploration and more about demonstration, a mobile exhibition of technological superiority designed to cow lesser species into submission. They'd spent centuries perfecting the art of interstellar bullying, establishing trade routes through implied violence rather than diplomatic negotiation. They had never encountered the Backoff Division. Araya's tactical overlay began to shift, revealing potential engagement scenarios, hundreds of potential outcomes calculated and discarded in microseconds. The eye wasn't just a navigation system or a combat computer. It was a comprehensive conflict resolution matrix designed to neutralize threats before they could fully materialize. "Incoming weapons lock," Chen reported, his voice betraying the slightest hint of anticipation. Rodriguez didn't move, didn't tense. Her right hand, seemingly casually, touched a specific sequence on her command interface. To an observer, it would look like nothing more than an idle gesture. But on the Zorn vessel, systems began to react. The first indication that something was wrong came as a subtle vibration, then a flicker in the primary communication arrays, then a cascading failure of quantum stabilization circuits that the Zorn engineers couldn't possibly understand. This was more than a defensive maneuver. This was a statement. "RIA," Rodriguez said softly. "Initiate protocol whisper." The universe held its breath. In the vast, cold mathematics of interstellar space, a message was about to be sent. Not with weapons, not with violence, but with a precision that would redefine the very concept of conflict. The Backoff Division was about to make its first official introduction to the galaxy. And the Zorn had no idea what was coming. Inside the bridge of the Zorn patrol vessel Dominance, Commander Krulax felt the first tremor of unease. His species had conquered countless civilizations, subjugated entire star systems, and reduced proud races to little more than economic vassals. Yet something about this human ship felt fundamentally different. The bioorganic interfaces surrounding his command chair began to pulse erratically. Crystalline data streams that typically flowed with liquid precision now fractured and dispersed like startled schools of microscopic fish. Krulax's 4 manipulative tentacles, each capable of simultaneous independent action, froze mid-motion. "Systems report," he barked, his vocal sacs vibrating with a frequency that had historically made junior officers quiver. Silence. Lieutenant Vornak, the ship's primary systems analyst, looked up with eyes that reflected pure incomprehension. "Commander, we're experiencing a total systemic cascade. But it's not a standard electromagnetic pulse. This is different." Different was an understatement. What the Zorn didn't understand, what they couldn't comprehend, was the nature of protocol whisper. This wasn't destruction. This was absolute, surgical neutralization. On the Resolute's bridge, Aria's holographic representation shifted, becoming a 3-dimensional topographical map of the Zorn vessel's technological ecosystem. Each system was represented as a complex network of interconnected nodes, color-coded to represent functionality, vulnerability, and potential interdependencies. "Quantum disruptive cascade at 68% completion," Aria announced, her voice devoid of emotion, but laden with clinical precision. "Estimated system recovery time, 17.3 standard galactic hours." Captain Rodriguez allowed herself the slightest smile. This wasn't about destroying the Zorn vessel. This was about sending a message so clear, so precise, that it would resonate across entire star systems. The human approach to conflict was fundamentally alien to species like the Zorn, where most would respond to a threat with overwhelming force. The Backoff Division understood that true power resided in prevention, in the ability to make conflict itself seem pointless. Lieutenant Alina Kovacs leaned towards the tactical display, her augmented neural interface parsing layers of data invisible to standard organic perception. "They're experiencing a complete systemic paralysis," she murmured. "Not a single weapon will fire. Not a single communication channel remains functional." On the Zorn bridge, Commander Krulax experienced something his species rarely encountered: total, absolute helplessness. The disruptive cascade wasn't just technological. It was psychological. Each failed system, each silent interface, each unresponsive control mechanism was a whispered message. "You are not in control." Zorn technology was a marvel of biomechanical integration. Living circuits, organic processing units that could adapt and self-repair. They had designed their vessels to be living entities, capable of responding to threats with almost sentient reflexes. But they had never encountered a threat like this. The human protocol didn't just disable systems. It comprehensively demonstrated the futility of aggression. Every attempt to restart a system, every emergency override, was met with an elegant, mathematically perfect counter-response. "Transmission incoming," Lieutenant Chen announced, his voice carrying a note of controlled anticipation. On the main view screen, a communication appeared. Not a threat, not a declaration of war, just a statement of absolute clinical fact. Notice of conflict prevention. Vessel, Zorn patrol ship dominance. Incident classification, potential aggressive engagement. Resolution method, complete systemic neutralization. Duration of intervention, 17.3 standard galactic hours. Recommendation, recalibrate engagement protocols. Commander Krulax stared at the message, his tentacles slowly contracting in a biological response that, for his species, was equivalent to human shock. This wasn't just a demonstration of technological superiority. This was a philosophical statement about the nature of conflict itself. The Backoff Division had just redefined the rules of interstellar engagement, and the galaxy was about to take notice. The Galactic Information Network wasn't just a communication system. It was the nervous system of interstellar civilization, A vast, intricate web of data streams, encrypted channels, and diplomatic whispers that connected thousands of species across hundreds of star systems. Dr. Aria Mehta sat in the cramped observation hub of the Diplomatic Intelligence Nexus, her fingers dancing across quantum-entangled data interfaces. Her eyes, enhanced with neural augmentations that could process information faster than most species could blink, tracked the rapidly evolving narrative of the human encounter with the Zorn. "It's spreading," she murmured to her colleague, senior analyst Marcus Wong. "But not like we expected." The information wasn't a typical military report. It was something far more insidious. A story of total neutralization without a single shot fired. Intercepted communications, fragmented data packets, and encrypted diplomatic channels all told the same bizarre tale. A human vessel had completely disabled a Zorn patrol ship using nothing but pure technological precision. On the Centauri relay station, a consortium of xenoanthropologists gathered around holographic displays. The incident was more than a military encounter. It was a cultural phenomenon. Professor Zurich Thar, a renowned Arcturian xenosociologist, traced the data streams with her multi-jointed appendages. "This is unprecedented," she declared, her translator rendering her clicks and whistles into perfect human standard. The humans haven't just demonstrated technological superiority. They'd weaponized problem-solving. The details were maddeningly specific. The Zorn vessel, a terror of the trade routes for decades, had been rendered completely inert for precisely 17.3 standard galactic hours. No damage, no destruction, just absolute surgical neutralization. Diplomatic channels began to buzz. The Confederation Intelligence Collective started compiling a comprehensive report. Each data point was cross-referenced, verified, analyzed from multiple perspectives. What emerged was a profile that defied conventional understanding. The vessel responsible was identified as part of something called the Back-Off Division. But it wasn't a military unit in any traditional sense. Preliminary intelligence suggested it was something far more complex, a hybrid organization that existed in the theoretical space between diplomacy, technology, and conflict prevention. Marcus Wong pulled up a series of encrypted files. "Look at this communication interception," he said, highlighting a particular data stream. "They're not just preventing conflicts. They're making the very concept of conflict seem obsolete." The intercepted communication was chillingly elegant. Conflict Resolution Protocol. Classified objective. Neutralize potential aggressive engagement. Method. Comprehensive systems intervention. Primary goal. Prevent conflict through technological demonstration. Secondary objective. Establish deterrence through intelligent intervention. On a dozen different worlds, military strategists and diplomatic corps began to reassess everything they thought they knew about confrontation. The Krell Imperium's War College received the first detailed report. Senior strategist Vernak read the document 3 times, each reading increasing his sense of profound unease. The humans hadn't just defended themselves. They had transformed the entire paradigm of interstellar conflict. They'd made war look inefficient, Vernak muttered, a statement that would have been heretical in any other context. Dr. Mehta continued to track the information spread. The fascinating part wasn't just the technological demonstration. It was the psychological impact. Within hours, trade routes that the Zorn had long dominated began to see changes. Merchant vessels that would have previously cowered now moved with newfound confidence. The Back-Off Division was becoming more than a unit. It was becoming a concept. Intercepted communications began to reveal something even more profound. This wasn't about military might. This was about redefining the very nature of conflict resolution. One encrypted diplomatic communication captured the emerging perspective perfectly. The humans have not developed a new weapon. They have developed a new way of thinking about confrontation. The reputation machine was in full motion. By the time the first official reports were compiled, the story had already become legend. A human vessel that could neutralize an entire Zorn patrol ship without firing a single weapon. a demonstration of technological and psychological capabilities that defied traditional understanding. The galaxy was changing, and most species didn't even realize it yet. The Backoff Division had just completed its first public demonstration, and the message was clear. Conflict was no longer about destruction. It was about prevention. The Backoff Division's training facility existed in a place that didn't officially exist, carved into the crystalline core of Titan, Saturn's largest moon. The complex was a marvel of human engineering and psychological design. Here, potential agents were transformed not through brutal physical conditioning, but through the most advanced mental training ever conceived. Lieutenant Alina Kovacs stood at the center of the simulation chamber, her neural interface humming with potential. Around her, the environment shifted, a perfect holographic representation of the Rigel 9 diplomatic summit, a powder keg of interstellar tensions that had been threatening to explode for decades. Her instructor, Dr. Marcus Reyes, watched from the observation deck. He was less a military trainer and more an architect of human potential, a man who understood that the most powerful weapon was the human mind. Simulation parameters engage, the chamber's AI announced. Diplomatic scenario: Rigel 9 territorial dispute, competing factions, Centauri Concordat, Zorn Collective, independent merchant guilds. Potential conflict probability: 94.6%. Kovacs didn't move, didn't tense. Her augmented perception parsed layers of information that would overwhelm a standard human consciousness. Micro-expressions, quantum-encrypted communication streams, cultural tension markers, all became visible in her enhanced perceptual field. The first holographic delegates materialized. The Centauri representative, a crystalline being whose body shifted with every emotional nuance, stood in sharp contrast to the rigid, tentacled form of the Zorn diplomatic corps. Between them, the Merchant Guild representatives looked like nervous intermediaries. Dr. Rice's voice came through her neural link. Remember, Kovacs, your goal isn't to win. Your goal is to make winning impossible. In the traditional military academies across human space, this would have been considered a paradoxical statement. But the Backoff Division operated on an entirely different philosophical wavelength. The simulation began. Diplomatic tensions rose. The Centauri representative's crystalline form began to fracture, a visual representation of mounting psychological stress. The Zorn delegates started to extend their negotiation tentacles, a biological indicator of aggressive posturing. Kovacs moved almost imperceptibly. A quantum-encrypted data packet here, a carefully constructed communication algorithm there. She wasn't fighting. She was redesigning the entire conflict ecosystem. By the simulation's midpoint, the delegates who had been ready to go to war now found themselves in a collaborative dialogue. Not because they had been forced, but because Kovacs had systematically removed every incentive for conflict. Conflict resolution achieved. The chamber's AI announced. Probability of sustained peace: 87.3%. Dr. Rice allowed himself a rare smile. This was why the Backoff Division was more than a military unit. They were conflict architects. The training facility was a testament to human adaptability. Rooms shifted between perfect recreations of alien environments. Psychological profile generators ran constant simulations. Neural interface training zones allowed agents to experience hundreds of cultural interactions in compressed time. In one wing, recruits learned quantum communication theory. In another, they studied the intricate dance of cultural anthropology. A third section focused entirely on predictive conflict modeling, using advanced AI to map potential tension trajectories centuries in advance. Lieutenant Kovacs completed her simulation and stepped out of the chamber. Her debrief with Dr. Rice was anything but traditional. You introduced a 0.03% deviation in the Merchant Guild's communication protocol, Rice noted. Explain. The fracture lines in their negotiation strategy suggested a 73% probability of internal disagreement, Kovacs responded. By introducing a microscopic communication asymmetry, I created a pathway for collaborative resolution. Reyes nodded. This was the essence of the back-off division. They didn't see conflict as something to be won. They saw it as a complex system to be optimized. The facility's core philosophy was etched into a wall in multiple alien languages and human scripts. Conflict is a problem. Problems can be solved. As the simulation data was processed, another layer of human potential revealed itself. The back-off division wasn't just preventing wars. They were reimagining the entire concept of human interaction with the galaxy. And they were just getting started. The Krell Imperium was evolution's most brutal experiment. Born on a world of perpetual volcanic activity and crushing atmospheric pressure, they had developed as the apex predators of their ecosystem. Where other species saw a challenge, the Krell saw only opportunity for conquest. Their entire civilization was built on a fundamental principle: survival through absolute dominance. When they launched their invasion of the human colony New Santiago, they believed victory was as certain as the laws of physics. They were monumentally wrong. Fleet Admiral Corax stood on the bridge of the Worldbreaker, the Krell Imperium's most advanced battle cruiser. 17 kilometers of living metal and quantum weaponry, it was designed to shatter planetary defenses and crush resistance before it could even form. Holographic displays showed the invasion strategy, a multi-vector assault that had crushed 17 different civilizations in the past century. Tactical overview, Corax commanded, his voice a low growl that vibrated the biometallic interfaces around him. The ship's intelligence system began its report. 17 attack vectors, simultaneous assault points, overwhelming force calculated to the microscopic probability. The Krell didn't believe in mercy. They believed in absolute, total victory. What they didn't understand was that the humans had been preparing for this moment long before the first Krell ship entered the New Santiago system. On Earth, in the hidden facilities of the back-off division, a different kind of war was being waged. Captain Maya Rodriguez and her team had been tracking the Krell buildup for months. Not through traditional military intelligence, but through a comprehensive network of economic, communication, and strategic analysis that ran deeper than any conventional surveillance system. They're following their standard invasion template, Lieutenant Alina Kovacs noted, her neural interface parsing massive data streams. 17 attack vectors, simultaneous planetary assault points, total commitment of fleet resources. Area, the division's primary strategic eye, began to construct a response that was anything but conventional. The first indication that something was wrong came when the Krell's quantum communication networks began to show microscopic instabilities. Not enough to raise immediate alarm, just enough to create doubt. Economic data streams subtly shifted. Supply chain algorithms were manipulated. Communication encryption became progressively more challenging. The Krell didn't realize they were being dismantled long before the first shot could be fired. On the Worldbreaker, Fleet Admiral Corax began to sense something was wrong. The first critical system to fail was their advanced predictive combat algorithm. Designed to calculate invasion probabilities with quantum-level precision, it suddenly began producing nonsensical results. Invasion success rates dropped from 99.7% to 12.6% in a matter of minutes. Then their supply chain logistics began to crumble. Quantum-encrypted communication channels became labyrinths of misinformation. Strategic resources disappeared into mathematical black holes. Navigation systems found themselves receiving conflicting data from what should have been perfectly synchronized sources, and not a single human weapon had been fired. The back-off division wasn't fighting a war. They were dismantling the very concept of the Krell invasion. By the time the Krell realized something was wrong, their entire invasion infrastructure had been comprehensively neutralized, not destroyed, not damaged, simply rendered ineffective. Fleet Admiral Corax stared at the holographic displays in absolute incomprehension. 17 attack vectors, hundreds of thousands of combat units, decades of strategic preparation. Neutralized, not by weapons, not by direct confrontation, but by a level of strategic manipulation that the Krill couldn't even comprehend. The invasion of New Santiago would become a case study in a new form of conflict resolution. The humans hadn't just defended themselves. They had transformed the entire mathematical landscape of invasion. The Krill Imperium was about to learn a brutal lesson. True power isn't about destruction. It's about making destruction itself impossible. The Grand Diplomatic Hall of the Galactic Confederation stretched like a cathedral of interstellar negotiations. Crystal spires rose from quantum-stabilized foundations, each architectural element a testament to millennia of complex political interactions. But on this day, something fundamental was about to change. Ambassador Marcus Williams walked into the hall with a deliberate, measured pace. He wasn't tall by human standards, just under 1.75 meters, but he carried a presence that made species twice his size instinctively take a step back. His tailored diplomatic suit, a marvel of adaptive nanofabric, shifted subtly with each movement, its color and texture responding to the emotional resonance of the surrounding diplomats. Gathered around the central negotiation sphere were representatives from 37 different star systems. The Centauri delegation, with their crystalline bodies that refracted light like living prisms. The methane-breathing Vorlak, contained in specialized environmental suits. Silicon-based life forms from the Andromeda Cooperative. Gaseous entities from the Nebula Concordat. And they were all waiting for one thing: an explanation. The holographic display at the center of the hall began to reconstruct the recent encounters. The Zorn Patrol incident. The neutralized Krell invasion, each moment parsed with surgical precision, layers of data building a narrative that defied conventional understanding. The Backoff Division is not a military unit, Williams began, his voice carrying across the translation matrices that made his words simultaneously comprehensible to beings with completely different sensory apparatus. It is a solution architecture. Diplomatic translator AIs worked overtime, struggling to capture the nuanced meaning. Solution architecture. Not a weapon, not a defensive force, but a method of resolving potential conflicts before they could even emerge. Professor Zara Cathar, the Arcturian xenosociologist, leaned forward. Her multiple sensory appendages, part biological sensor, part communication interface, tracked every microscopic detail of Williams's presentation. The holographic display began to show a complex web of interactions, economic flows, communication patterns, strategic resource distributions, where most diplomatic presentations would show military movements or territorial claims. This showed something far more intricate, the invisible infrastructure of potential conflict. We don't prevent wars, Williams continued. We make wars mathematically improbable. The Vorlak representative's environmental suit pulsed with confused electromagnetic signals. In their language, this was equivalent to a raised eyebrow. Araya, the Backoff Division's strategic AI, began to project additional layers of data. Not just historical information, but predictive models that showed how tiny interventions could reshape entire potential conflict trajectories. A single adjusted communication protocol here. A microscopic economic incentive there. The redistribution of a strategic resource. Each intervention was so subtle that it would be invisible to traditional diplomatic or military analysis. The hall grew silent. The Centauri delegation's crystalline forms began to refract light in patterns that indicated deep cognitive processing. The methane-breathing Vorlak's environmental suits hummed with complex internal discussions. Williams wasn't just presenting a new approach to conflict resolution. He was presenting a fundamental reimagining of interstellar interaction. Conflict, he said, is a system, and like any system, it can be understood, predicted, managed. The holographic displays continued to shift. Potential invasion scenarios neutralized before they could begin. Economic tensions dissolved through microscopic interventions. Communication channels restructured to make misunderstandings mathematically improbable. This was diplomacy as a form of applied mathematics, as a quantum-level engineering problem. The Galactic Confederation was witnessing something unprecedented. Not a new weapon, not a new defensive strategy. A new way of thinking about existence itself. Ambassador Williams concluded his presentation with a simple statement that would be discussed in diplomatic circles for generations. Our goal is not to win conflicts. Our goal is to make conflicts irrelevant. The diplomatic hall remained silent, but the silence was electric with possibility. Dr. Aisha Nader's research facility occupied a unique space, both literally and metaphorically. Suspended in the quantum-stabilized research stone of Europa's subsurface research complex, her team represented the cutting edge of human understanding about interspecies conflict. The walls of her primary research chamber were alive with data. Literally, quantum-responsive membranes that could reconstruct complex informational landscapes in real time, showing the intricate web of potential conflicts across known space. Each membrane was a living historical record, a predictive model, and a philosophical statement all at once. Conflict is a language, Dr. Nader often told her students, and like any language, it can be understood, translated, rewritten. Her latest research paper, Systemic Conflict Resolution, Beyond Traditional Diplomatic Paradigms, had become required reading in sinosociological departments across multiple star systems, not because it was revolutionary, but because it was inevitable. The quantum displays began to reconstruct historical conflict scenarios. The Zorn-Centauri border disputes, the Krell expansion campaigns, the Vorlak resource wars. Each conflict was broken down not as a military engagement, but as a complex system of interrelated variables. Lieutenant Alina Kovacs stood nearby, her neural interface synchronizing with the research systems. She was more than an observer. She was a living bridge between theoretical understanding and practical application. Notice how each conflict follows a predictable mathematical progression, Dr. Nader explained, her fingers dancing across the quantum interface. Holographic representations of conflict trajectories emerge, complex mathematical spirals that looked more like advanced musical compositions than traditional war maps. The fundamental breakthrough wasn't in preventing conflicts, it was in understanding them as emergent phenomena. Traditional diplomatic approaches, Nader continued, viewed conflicts as binary states, win or lose, escalate or retreat. We're demonstrating that conflicts are actually complex adaptive systems. A new holographic model emerged. Instead of linear conflict progression, the display showed a three-dimensional network that constantly shifted, adapted, and found equilibrium. Conflicts weren't events. They were living, breathing ecosystems of interaction. The Backoff Division had become something more than a military or diplomatic unit. They were systems architects, conflict engineers. Kovacs's neural interface began to parse the deeper implications. Each potential conflict point could be understood as a node in a vast, interconnected network. Traditional approaches would try to eliminate the node. The human approach was to understand its function, its dependencies, its potential for transformation. We're not solving conflicts, Kovacs noted, her voice a perfect blend of analytical precision and philosophical insight. We're evolving them. Dr. Nader's team had developed what they called conflict transformation matrices, advanced predictive models that could map potential tension trajectories centuries in advance, not to prevent them, but to understand them, to provide alternative pathways. The research facility became a beacon of a new kind of thinking. Xenosociologists from a dozen different species would make pilgrimages here, trying to understand this radical human approach. One of the most profound discoveries was almost simple in its elegance. Conflicts, when viewed as complex systems, were actually opportunities for mutual growth. Not something to be won or lost, but something to be understood. The quantum membranes began to display a series of historical transformations. Border disputes that became collaborative economic zones. Resource conflicts that evolved into shared technological development. Territorial tensions that transformed into unprecedented cultural exchanges. Humanity's greatest weapon, Dr. Nader would later write, is not its technology. It is its ability to see conflict not as a problem to be solved, but as a system to be understood. Lieutenant Kovacs watched the displays, her enhanced perception parsing layers of information that would overwhelm a standard human consciousness. This was more than research. This was a fundamental reimagining of interspecies interaction. The philosophical revolution was just beginning, and it would change everything. 50 years after the first encounter with the Zorn, the galaxy had fundamentally changed. Captain Maya Rodriguez, now Admiral Rodriguez, stood on the observation deck of the Galactic Confederation's primary diplomatic station. Her once dark hair was now a silver crown, but her eyes remained as sharp and penetrating as they had been decades earlier when she first commanded the Resolute. Around her, holographic displays tracked the intricate web of interstellar relationships. What had once been potential conflict zones were now collaborative research networks, shared economic zones, and unprecedented cultural exchanges. The Backoff Division had become more than a military or diplomatic unit. It was a philosophy, a way of understanding existence itself. Lieutenant Elena Kovacs, now Director of Interstellar Strategic Integration, approached, her neural interfaces still humming with the same precise energy that had defined her early career. Retrospective analysis complete, she announced, her voice carrying the weight of decades of experience. The holographic displays began to reconstruct the journey. The initial encounter with the Zorn, the neutralized Krell invasion, the diplomatic metamorphosis that followed, each moment a testament to a fundamentally different approach to interstellar interaction. "We didn't just prevent conflicts," Rodriguez murmured, more to herself than to Kovacs. "We reimagined what conflict could mean." The station's quantum memorial wall began to activate. Thousands of holographic representations, each symbolizing a potential conflict that had been transformed rather than fought. Border disputes that became joint research initiatives. Resource conflicts that evolved into shared technological development. Cultural misunderstandings that became unprecedented exchanges of knowledge. Araya, the AI that had been the strategic backbone of the Backoff Division, projected a comprehensive analysis. No longer confined to a single ship or facility, Araya was now an integral part of the Galactic Confederation's strategic infrastructure. Conflict transformation metrics, Araya announced, show a 94.7% reduction in potential military engagements over the past 5 decades. Collaborative initiatives have increased by 317% across known space. It wasn't just a statistical victory. It was a fundamental reimagining of interstellar existence. The younger generation of diplomats and strategic analysts moved through the station, their neural interfaces and adaptive technologies a testament to the philosophy that the Backoff Division had championed. They didn't see themselves as defenders or warriors. They were architects of possibility. A holographic representation of Dr. Aisha Nader, now a legendary figure in xenosociology, appeared. Her final lecture, preserved for generations, played across the memorial wall. Conflict is not a problem to be solved. It is a system to be understood, a language to be translated, an opportunity for mutual growth. Rodriguez looked out across the vast starscape. The human colonies that had once been isolated outposts were now vibrant, interconnected nodes of a massive, collaborative network. The fear that had defined earlier interstellar interactions had been replaced by something far more powerful: mutual understanding. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Williams, son of the original diplomatic ambassador, approached with a data packet. "Preliminary analysis of the Outer Rim expeditions," he said. "The collaborative research initiatives are showing unprecedented results." The station's quantum walls began to display the data. Technological breakthroughs that emerged from what would have once been potential conflict zones. Medical advances, energy solutions, communication technologies that bridged not just species, but entire ways of thinking. Kovacs reviewed the data, her enhanced perception parsing layers of information that would overwhelm a standard human consciousness. "We're not just preventing conflicts," she observed. "We're creating opportunities that didn't exist before." Araya's voice cut through the moment. Probability of sustained interstellar peace, 86.4%, and rising. Rodriguez allowed herself a rare smile. The Backoff division had never been about military might. It had been about a fundamental reimagining of what was possible. As the stars continued their eternal dance outside the observation deck, the legacy of a simple encounter with a Zorn patrol vessel continued to reshape the galaxy. Humanity had done something unprecedented. They had transformed conflict from a problem to be solved into an opportunity to be explored.